5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome everyone to this webinar for Kingsland Minerals, ASX code KNG. Shortly, I'll introduce Managing Director Mr Maddocks, who will provide an update on the company's large, leveraged Australian graphite opportunity in the Northern Territory and future work plans for that asset. Following the formal update, you will have the opportunity to ask questions of Richard during our Q&A session. So as the presentation is occurring, think about your questions. What you would like to ask, what you would like to know. Submit them in the Q&A bottom box at the bottom of your screen, and I will put them to Richard during the Q&A session. Okay, let's get started. I would now like to introduce Kingsland Minerals Managing Director, Mr Maddocks, who will give you the formal presentation. Richard, over to you.
Great, thanks for that introduction, David. Yes, I'm the MD of Kingsland Minerals, and we've got a graphite project in the Northern Territory, which we're currently drilling. I'd like to just go through what we've got up there. We've released an exploration target in the last couple of months, so I'll go through the basis of that exploration target and what we've got there. And then I'll also discuss briefly our ongoing drilling programs and what we've got planned for the future as well. So let's just start now and off to the first slide. And yes, you can see there, that's the highlights we've got of our project in the NT. We've got large scale there. We think we've got a fairly big project there based on the exploration target. We're in a fantastic location, only about 2 hours south of Darwin, and we're drilling now to convert that exploration target, or as much as we can, to resource and start doing some metallurgical test work as well. So the next slide will show you some of the other highlights there of the project. As I suggested, it's a large project with large scale. We've got 20 kilometres of outcropping graphitic schist on our tenements up there. There's been a little bit of previous work done in the past, exploration work, nothing focused on graphite, but a little sort of sprinkling of exploration work there done. We know we've got some flake graphite there, up to 160 microns, and we know also we've got decent grades of graphite as well. I guess the attractive thing now for graphite projects at the moment is the demand, or the growing demand, for electric vehicles. We're well placed to take advantage of that, given the fact that there's forecasts of significant factors of demand required for graphite in 10 years. And that last point on the slide here is just a brief sort of corporate snapshot. You can see our market cap's only $14 million. We've got $9 million cash as of, with an EV of around $12 million. So we're not valued at much. We think that'll change when we start getting some drilling results out of the project. Scale of it, I think there's scope for a re-rate. Now, going forward to some more details on the next slide of the project itself, you can see there we're located about 2.5 hours drive south of Darwin. It's a fantastic place to work there with infrastructure. Pine Creek is an historic mining area. There's been gold mining there for the last 150 years or so. There's been lots of large mines there in the past, so the local community there is used to mining and exploration, and they're supportive of it. And the next slide will show you some of the advantages of working in that location there. You can see we're about 20 kilometres away from some, the major infrastructure corridor, north-south leading into Darwin. We're close to gas pipelines, railway lines, high voltage power lines, sealed highways. There's a service centre there at Pine Creek. We're only 2 hours, or 2.5 hours south of Darwin, and only an hour drive from Catherine. So it's well placed there for any future work and any development work which may occur in the future. So the next slide just shows the geology of the project. We've got 20 kilometres of graphitic schist. It's located at the contact between granites and carbonaceous shales. The hot granites, when they're intruded as magma, have metamorphosed the carbon into graphite. So you've got this metamorphic contact zone along that granite contact there, containing graphitic schist. And the next slide will highlight some of the historic exploration that's been done there. Oh no, that's and there's one more. You click once more, you can see the contact there, and that highlights the graphitic schist unit along the contact. So the next slide, yeah, there you go there. You can see that red line there, contact. It's a continuous structure which goes right through our tenement hole in there, and that's where the graphitic schist is. The next slide will highlight some of the historic exploration there. Yeah, as I suggested, the previous explorers were mainly looking for copper and uranium, but as an afterthought, I did sample some of these holes for graphite. There's some of those numbers there. These were, 5 and 6 metre copper samples found some older RC holes. And they just highlight the great nature of some of the graphite. And also the fact that Patrick Prospect, Leo Prospect are about 20 kilometres apart. And they've both got good intersections of grades of graphite. Now, if you look at that section in the middle there, which is labelled AB, with that hole TALDD001, the next slide shows that section. And you can see there was a couple of holes drilled there. An RC hole which had 156 metres of graphitic schist. That was targeting an EM anomaly for copper. There was no copper there, so they didn't assay it. They hit a lot of schist or graphitic schist. A couple of years later, a diamond drill hole was put down. I'm not sure whether it was targeting copper or whether it was targeting graphite, but it doesn't matter either way. They took some samples down the hole, just little sections of core at occasional intervals down the hole there. And they were assayed for graphite. You can see there's some grains of graphite within that graphitic schist. I guess what's more important is it was also put in for microscopic petrography work, and you can see on the next slide the results of that, which highlight the fact that there is flake graphite there. And this is just one picture of the 18 samples they took, and you can see the flaky nature of the graphite there. The PO label there is pyrrhotite. There are some sulfides in the sequence there, but there's flake graphite there. In this particular example here, it's up to 20 microns, averaging 60 microns. And on the next slide, it summarises all of that work there. And you can see on that one particular hole, flake sizes up to 160 is a maximum, and averaging that sort of 50 to 80 mark, which is a good size moving forward for the final end product of spherical graphite for batteries. Historically, graphite was an industrial mineral, and the demand was for large, jumbo flake graphite for that. But now with batteries taking over as the main end use for graphite, the smaller size flakes are preferable to convert into spherical graphite. On the next slide, you can see the, that's one of the core photographs there of that old core. We haven't got the core, they've only got the photographs from the previous explorers, but you can see how they sampled small slabs of core there, highlighted in the red squares, and assayed that and got the flake size. But you can see here, it's a continuous graphitic schist unit that goes right down that hole. There are a couple of narrow granitic dikes of maybe up to 2 or 3 metres, but generally it's graphitic schist all the way down with these sort of grades and that sort of flake size profile. The next slide will show you the exploration target. You can see on that small square there, dotted square labelled exploration target, we've only highlighted about 25% of the total extent of graphitic schists. We thought we'd take a small bite rather than tackle the whole thing at once. It's potentially a very large target, so we thought to be able to handle a smaller area might be better for the drilling and the future work. But that small little 5 kilometre zone there is the basis of the exploration target of between 200 and 250 million tonnes at 8 to 11% graphitic content. You can see this, the measurements it's based on there. It's essentially based on that section I just showed you before. Now, we do expect variations in it. It will get wider and it will get narrower, and the grade will vary and the flake size will vary as well. And we'll pick that up in the ongoing drilling program, which I'll discuss a bit later. So the next slide will highlight closer on the exploration target area. And we've done some ground EM work. It's complete now. This slide doesn't show all of the lines that we've done, but it just highlights, you can see the pink areas there, which highlight the graphitic schist, which has a high EM response. And we can use this method to find out the final positions of the hanging wall and also the sort of the surface extents. And so far it indicates that we've got a fairly continuous zone there. And moving on to the next slide, you can see the exploration target there. Again, this is a schematic of the drilling program. We've started drilling up there. We started about 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. We've drilled some holes on the eastern end to start up, and we're now drilling on the western end there. So the aim is to drill that out into at least an inferred category and hopefully get indicated in some areas there. It's a bit of a learning experience right now. We've got to work out where the hanging wall and footwall contacts are exactly to get the best position for the rigs. We're doing that now, and we're having good progress now with the drilling. And the next slide will just summarise some of those things I've said, which, while we're excited for this project, we've got outcropping graphitic schist about 100 metres wide. We know it goes for a strike length of about 20 kilometres based on the aerial magnetics and also just surface mapping. We know we've got good grades there based on historic drilling. We know we've got flake graphite up to 160 microns at least based on historical work. It outcrops on surface, as I mentioned. It's relatively simple geology. It's a vertically dipping zone along a contact there. It's open at depth, and it's a fairly exciting prospect. And you can see that section there, just to highlight what we've got there. We're trying to replicate that sort of drilling on the our current program. We're doing about 2 holes per section right now, just to get an idea of where they're hanging. We're only drilling down to a maximum depth of about 150 metres. We don't think there's any need to drill too deeper at this stage, given the lateral extents of it. We started drilling 2 weeks ago. We had a few little issues there as we started with the rig getting used to the drilling conditions. The rig came from interstate, and the contractors, AMWD, did a great job of getting it there quickly and starting to drilling. So there's a couple of maintenance issues there. But we're in full swing now. I was hoping to be able to discuss the drilling in more details, and we're still waiting for some information to get back from site, and we'll update the market shortly with a drilling update on the progress as well. So the next slide is just a photograph of the outcropping graphite there. You can see those hand specimens there taken from the surface. Like I said, it's a great place to do work there. It's easily accessible. You can see the terrain there is fairly good for drilling, and it's a good project, I think, for future growth potential. The next slide is just to highlight what I've said there. Leliyn's got scale. It's a big project. You can see from the 20-kilometre strike length, there's considerable potential to increase that exploration target and hopefully grow any future resource we have as well. So it is a project of, we think, global, potentially global scale. It's got a great location, 2 hours drive from the Port of Darwin, and obviously the Port of Darwin is easily accessible to some of the major endpoints for graphite, South Korea, Japan, and China. And also we're drilling now to prove this up. I guess an important aspect which I haven't discussed is the metallurgy of the project. Metallurgy is very important in graphite. We've got to make sure we get a good flotation product, and that'll be our initial test work. Try and get a flotation concentrate grade of, say, 90%, with good recoveries, and from then we'll do further work to assess the suitability of the graphite to manufacture spherical graphite for battery use. The next slide is just a quick corporate update. I mentioned at the start there, we've only been on the market now for about 11 months since we listed, 20 cents. The shares now are trading at around 32 to 34 cents. We've been very excited about the response in the last month or so to our project there. We initially were listed on some of our uranium assets, and we drilled them out last year. And when we were drilling those out, we realised that ferritic potential was fairly significant, so we've sort of switched over to graphite. I think that's reflected in the share price going forward. So look, I'd like to have given you more update on the current drilling. That'll come out soon. As I suggested, we're drilling now. We're hitting what we thought we would hit. We've completed about 4 holes to date. Drilling is continuing. Diamond core will be on site next Tuesday, and that'll be drilling to get some metallurgical samples, which we'll submit to the lab as soon as we can. So we're looking for a fairly exciting sequence news flow over the coming months with assay results and metallurgical test results as well. So I guess now I'll hand it over to you, David, and we'll see if there's any questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Richard. Stack of questions coming through. And we love an excited MD, clearly very excited about the project and the prospectivity. One question, when you identified, and I apologise in advance if I mispronounced the name, but the Leliyn project, how did you identify and then delineate sort of that strike length of that, what was it, near enough 20 kilometres? Was it visual at surface, or were there other tools that you used?
Well, when we were getting the data together to list the company a couple of years ago, the focus was on gold and copper and uranium. We didn't have much information on the graphite. For a couple of very brief mentions of it in some historical ASX releases by previous explorers. We didn't have the data for it, so we couldn't properly assess it. After we listed, we subsequently obtained some data which contained more details on the sampling and the assaying for the graphite. So we had a bit more information which we could build upon, and that enabled us to look at the extent of the historical results. And as we were drilling on the Cleo uranium project last year, we noted that there was a lot of that was hosted essentially in some later intrusives intruding into graphitic schists. So we recognised there were graphitic schists along this sequence. So we just put together the information we had and realised that this has got a significant potential here. So I suppose it was fortuitous in that regard. I think until very recently, graphite was a fairly niche industrial mineral, so people didn't perhaps recognise the potential for it. And now that the lithium-ion battery market is taking over as the main source of demand for graphite, I think these sort of projects are now coming into their own, and we're lucky there to identify the opportunity and be well placed to take advantage of it.
Now, I've got a stack of questions. I'm going to try and group some of them because they are essentially based on the same theme. So when you do put out the next update around activity or market update, do you think you'll be looking to include visuals of core or visuals of any of the results that you're seeing?
Yes. Like I said, we've completed about 4 holes now for the graphite. Like I said, we did have a few false starts. We had to find the best spot to place the RC rig, so we didn't get too much granite or not enough graphitic schist in the sample. So we had a couple of short holes. We sort of stopped early to relocate the rig, but we've sorted out now where we want to drill, and we're pleased with the progress. And we start core drilling, like I said, next week. So I'd like to think that yes, we will have results, releases coming forward, and we will be able to look at what we've got. And I mean, we have to be careful with that. We haven't got assays back yet, so just seeing graphitic schist doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be high grade. It's encouraging that the geology is where we expect it to be, and we are getting graphitic schist, and that's the encouraging.
And what do you think turnaround times on assay results look like?
Look, we're being told maybe 4 to 6 weeks for our turnaround time. So, we've only just submitted our first batches in the previous few days. So, we'll be looking at, late June at the earliest, I'd imagine, to get assay results, maybe coming into July.
And is that coupled with the MET results?
Well, no, that's a bit different. The MET results will be done on the diamond core. Yep. So we'll start drilling next week to get some representative samples in the fresh rock and maybe in the slightly sort of weathered rock as well. That'll take a bit longer. It might take us, a month or so to generate enough samples from various points in the deposit to submit a representative sample for the test work for metallurgy. And that work itself might take an additional 2 to 3 months to complete as well. We're doing the work at IMO in Perth laboratories who've been experienced in the graphite scene. So I'd expect, I wouldn't expect any metallurgical test results back until maybe the September quarter.
And is the plan just to get the drill bit spinning and just keep it spinning, and you will be getting assay results along that journey, but you've clearly got a structure to find that you want to test. So is the plan just to keep drilling and drilling?
Well, look, yeah, we'd like to. Initially we want to work out just to prove the concept that how wide it is and what the grade is of the graphitic schist, the graphite content. We expect, as I mentioned before, we expect to get some variations in grade, flake size, and widths and things like that. So we'll try and get an idea of those variations, and that will enable us to target areas at a later date. Obviously, we've got $2.5 million in the bank by the end of March, so that's not a limiting factor at this stage. The expenditure, we're funded for a decent drilling program, but obviously going forward we'll have to assess how much we can spend up front on that. I think the idea will be to drill most of this dry season till November, and then assess the next work program for next year.
We've got a stack of questions going through. So is diamond drilling anticipated to be at similar depths to the RC drilling? And can you talk to the spacing of your RC drilling?
Yeah, look, given the simplicity, it's fairly simple geology. It's a wide vertically dipping graphitic schist zone. So it's not drill intensive in the fact to work out orientations and widths and things like that. The current drilling we're planning on 200-metre sections for the RC, down to 150 metres vertical depth. We didn't see a need to drill deeper than that, given the width of the ore body. So, we can hopefully generate a lot of tonnes into resource at relatively shallow drilling. And the same with the diamond drilling. We'll be doing HQ drilling from surface to get samples down to 150 metres. If it develops, we'll do economic assessments and see whether it's worthwhile drilling deeper at some later stage. But right now, to save drilling funds, things like that, we don't want to spend too much money on deeper drilling when it's not necessary. So the initial drilling will be on 200-metre space drilling. We expect that may be enough to get us inferred resource. We'll have to check with our consultants on that. If it's not, we can infill to 100-metre space drilling as well. But it's not a drilling intensive ore body, which is fortunate.
What's the importance of upcoming MET test work on the diamond drill core?
Well, yeah, graphite's all about the metallurgy. You've got to have the right flake size. You've got to have the right concentrate grades for marketable end product, and that'll be the focus of the test work. The test work first will be done to establish flotation characteristics. As I suggested, you'd like to get a flotation concentrate grade above 92% graphite. You'll want to get your recoveries as high as possible. Typically high 80s to 90% is very good. And if you can get a clean concentrate from your flotation, that can be used for your downstream test work to see if you can produce the spherical graphite for battery use. So it's a fairly lengthy process to get to that end product, but hopefully we can get some good results out of that in the next 6 months or so and work on that. But as I said, we do expect to get variability in the ore, so we've got to make sure we get the representative samples which can give us the best result.
I'm going to read some of these questions as presented because it might be the most efficient way to do it. Will there be sufficient drill holes to have an inferred resource over the entirety of the JORC exploration target from this current drilling campaign?
Oh, look! I'd like to think we could do that. I think it's also mindful that we are working on an operating cattle station as well. So we've got considerations there with the business going on there. There's a couple of areas which we're staying away from for the time being because there's water sources there for cattle. We're hoping to drill those later on in the dry season or just before the wet season starts. So we'd like to think that we're aiming to get that entire area converted into a resource. But then again, if it depends on the results of some of the initial assaying. We don't need to get a big resource up front to have an economically viable deposit. So we may well focus on a smaller zone to convert to resource and have more drilling in that. So it's a higher category like indicated resource, which we can work on more going forward. So it all depends on the initial drilling phases and how we go with grades and widths and things like that. Ultimately we'd like to, but also don't forget we've got 20 kilometres of strike length. We're only targeting 5 kilometres. So we can chop and change a bit with regards to where we drill to get the best bang for our buck and so to speak.
Obviously, if grades and recoveries are high, then this would be, in the person asking the question words, one of the largest projects of its kind in Australia. But at a worst case, does being such a big resource and, as large as you've indicated, help if grades or recoveries are slightly lower than expected?
Oh, look, it's hard to answer that question without actually getting, test work from what we've got. I guess the advantage is we have got considerable strike extent and we expect to get variabilities in that. So some zones will have higher grades or higher recoveries and things like that than other zones. So there is flexibility there. If some areas aren't positive, we can go to other areas which may be positive. So it gives us scope to hunt for those elephants, I suppose, within that 20 kilometre zone. And like I said, we don't know the variability of the ore body. And that's one thing we'll find out with the current drilling. But yes, the question is correct that there's considerable scale and that lends itself to a bit of flexibility on where we explore to try and find the best product, I suppose.
Yeah, and does XRF technology and the XRF guns play a role here? Does that actually help?
Look, yeah, we're not using XRFs at the moment. We're just assaying for graphite. Don't forget that there's graphite's pure carbon, but there's also carbon in other minerals as well, and carbon is not graphite. So just having a straight carbon assay isn't appropriate. You need to define it into graphite, and the assay process is quite particular in how it gets rid of all of the other carbon sample and only leaves behind the graphite, the graphitic carbon. So look, I'm not an expert on XRFs. I'm not sure if you can get XRFs that do graphite only, but given the flaky nature of it anyway, it probably wouldn't give you a very accurate result, but I'm not quite sure on that.
Yep. Now someone has to apologise because they did arrive a bit late, so this may have been covered. But the resource size estimate that you've put out there, how did you come to that number?
Well, first of all, it's not a resource; it's an exploration target.
Yep.
I've have to clarify that. But the exploration target is based on that section within the exploration target, which indicated that the graphitic schist was 100 metres wide and is at least 200 metres depth, vertical depth, and it's got grades on the drilling within it, between, we've averaged out about 8 to 11%. So if you 5 kilometres times 100 metres wide times 200 metres deep, and we use a density of 2.5 tonnes per cubic metre, that gets you that number between 200 and 250 tonnes at the sort of average grades on that diamond hole that was sampled. So it's only indicative. An exploration target is not a mineral resource. We need to do more drilling to get a mineral resource, but it just illustrates that there is data there which suggests we have got something to target.
Now, you did mention earlier that potentially this project could be globally significant. Who do you compare yourself to? What's your peer comparison?
Oh, look, again, it's probably a bit premature now because we haven't got a resource. No, the basis of that comment was on the 20 kilometres of strike length and the exploration target on a quarter of that, up to 250 million tonnes. So if we convert our exploration target into resource and we expand that along the strike, it's a globally significant graphitic deposit. But it depends also on the metallurgy. Graphite in the ground is not worth much if you can't process it in product. So it's early days yet. And that's the point of, this is a highly leveraged project on the basis of the extent of the graphitic schist. We know we've got a lot of rock there with graphite in it. It's a matter of quantifying that with drilling and test work to see what's there. So, if everything happens smoothly and well, and we get nice numbers and metallurgy, yes, it could be globally significant, but there's still a long way to go on.
There are a few more questions, but we may deal with them offline. Richard, as you say, extremely leveraged project, a significant opportunity. The potential is there. The drilling's being done, well funded, a clear path, strong news flow, all the things that investors like to see. Mm-hmm. Yep. Wish you all the best for the future and for Kingsland Minerals. Exciting times ahead. And thanks for telling the story, and for those listening, thanks for participating. A stack of good questions coming through still, and we'll deal with them offline, but the recording will be available at both the Market Open and the Kingsland Minerals websites over the next 24 hours. But Richard, thanks for the presentation.
No worries, David. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the listeners for tuning in as well.
Like a good way to finish that there. And like you said, thanks to all the participants who jumped on and heard the presentation. Clearly leveraged to that exploration success. Exciting times ahead, a company to watch, Kingsland Minerals. Richard, thanks for your time.